to have some kind of great scheme for diversification or getting into new markets so that the margin is increased so you can start paying off your debts rather than falling deeper into debt. That's what this parable is about. This parable is about bumper crops. Let's imagine the Palestinian small, freeholding, dry soil farmer. That is Palestinian agriculture in the first century. You have folks on these little plots of land. And the poorer they are, the more degraded the land is, right? Because they've been pushed out by the cycle of consolidated farming. That is what the prophets call those who joined house to house and field to field. That was the process of creating what the sociologists call the latifundia. You know that term? It's an Italian term that just means great folding. And the process is a fancy term, you can use it at your next cocktail party. The latifundialization of the land. Right? It just means the process in which small farmers keep getting pushed out of the market and their land is consolidated more and more into bigger holdings until you have these huge estates which are called latifundia. It's a fancy term for the process we're all very familiar with. Now, in first century Palestine, these small holders, these small family farmers, extended family farmers is probably a more accurate term, they're living on the tough soil. The soil is not very good because they're on the margins. It's rocky soil. It's dry soil. It's shallow soil. What did the biodynamic farmers say? The future of the earth is all dependent on the first 3 inches. The topsoil, the quality of the topsoil is what it's all about. Well, what kind of soil are we talking about here in this parable? Good soil or bad soil? Pretty rough soil. We're talking about rocky soil, dry soil, shallow soil. That's exactly what this parable says, isn't it? Now, theological folks over at the Theological Hall in the city of Melbourne who've never probably planted a seed in their life might figure that this is some very cosmic meaning, but as far as farmers are concerned, we're talking about rocky soil, dry soil, shallow soil, and it's tough to farm. Oh yeah, we know all about that, they're saying to Jesus. How are your crops this year, he says. Not too good. You know, I go out and I'll plant my grain. Now this is how they sow. This is how they plant. They don't come in with their big combines making straight lines and dropping the seed behind them. They go out with bags of seed and they precast. That's how it was done. It's just a particular style of farming if you're poor. And if the soil is tough, and if you don't have the tools, you don't have enough land, you don't have irrigation, most land was not irrigated in first century Palestine, so it was utterly dependent on getting good weather. So you're out there precasting your seed. Where'd you get the seed? From last year's crop. All right, so let's say you got last year's crop, and let's say you got 100 bushels. Do you use bushels here? Yeah. All right, 100 bushels. And let's say that the yield you get for every unit you put in as seed, let's say in a very, very good year's yield, remember, this is dry soil, non-irrigated, free casting farming. A really good yield is 5-fold. Well, you've already gotten the gist of the parable, haven't you? 5-fold is a really good yield for a dry soil farmer. So you need to get 100 bushels. So you need to set aside how much for seed? Minimally 20. If you want a little bit of a margin, because you might not get 5-fold, maybe you better put aside 30 bushels for seed. Now, how are you going to pay rent on your land? Most small farmers, being tenant farmers, have to pay some kind of rent, some kind of lease on the land, and for a great many of them, it was anywhere from 40 to 60% of their total yield. Right, this is a traditional economy. You're not paying in cash, you're paying in your produce. So let's be conservative. Let's say only 40% of your yield. There goes 40 bushels. Got to have some seed left for barter, for some tools, repairing tools, that kind of thing. Let's say very conservatively, 10 bushels, just so you can get your tools sharpened, get them fixed and repaired on the barter market. Oh yeah, let's not forget you got to feed your family. What's that worth? I don't know. Let's be conservative again. 20, 30 bushels to feed the family? I don't know. You all know more about it than I do. Say it's a lean year. Let's say 30 bushels just to feed everybody. Oh yeah. Now we got taxes to deal with and tithes to deal with. Well, you all know what the tithing percentage is if you're a good Jewish farmer. What's that? That's 10%. There's 10 more bushels. We got Paul over here doing the math on a calculator for us. Paul, you tell us when we get over 100. Then we got taxes, and throw taxes anywhere between 20 and 30% right there, at least in that time, because you see you've got not just the taxes to the local municipality, you've got taxes to the overall political system, which happens to be under foreign occupation at the time, and Rome, the occupying power, is exacting taxes, which are called tributes, from the client king, who in turn passes that cost on, as we would say today, to the farmers. And there was a neat little system called tax farming in antiquity. And tax farming was when the royal elite would turn over the tax gathering task to independent contractors. If this sounds anything like where the monetarists and the privatization is trying to go, you draw your own conclusions. Anyway, they turned the task over to independent contractors who then, that was farming the tax out, and they would collect the taxes, but of course they had to turn a profit, so they charged a little extra. So we got maybe another minimum 30 bushels. So what are we up to here, Pablo? Well, the way I look at it, it's at least 150 there. 150 bushels, whoops. Well, of course, got to have seed. And you got to pay the rent. And you got to, well, maybe you let your tools go this year. Let the machinery go one more year. You gotta feed your family, but maybe you tighten your belt and save a little bit there. Tithes, if you don't pay your tithes, you're going to be under strictures from your social community. And if you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail. Things haven't changed all that much. What are you going to do? You're going to do what, folks do, and that is, first thing you start doing is giving up your leasehold. You can't rent this much land. You can't afford it. So you start losing your land. And when you've lost enough of your land, or if you owned the land, then you start to mortgage it out. Take out a second mortgage. Now the bank owns it, but of course there are no banks in first century Palestine, so who are you taking your loans from? From moneylenders, or who were the moneylenders? Who had lots of surplus cash? Larger landowners, right. And that's how the system worked very directly. You didn't have the intermediate of the banking industry. It was just directly large landowners to small landowners. And so more and more the land goes to the rich landowners, and the land base keeps shrinking. And once you've lost increasing parts of your land, then what do you have to sell? Your labor. See, first you start by accruing debt. Then you go on to losing your land. And when all is said and done and you've gotten so much debt that you've lost your land, finally all you have to sell is your labor, and you become a bond servant or a day laborer.